What's going on, everyone? Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media, and I am here live from Radio Row here in the Indianapolis for the NFL Combine, and I am joined by friend of the show, Snyder of the Bootleg and Bear Down podcast, one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to rosters, the draft, free agency. The guy, look at him. He's knowledgeable as hell. You already know. He's been on the show, and we are here to talk the Pats, the new regime, impending free agency, and of course, because we are at the Combine, we will be talking draft. So, EJ, first, thanks for joining me once again, buddy. So, new regime. Mike Vrabel back, different role. He's in charge now as the head coach. Yes. Also, Josh McDaniels is back in the fold once again, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator for the first time. Terrell Williams, longtime defensive line coach. Now, the defense kind of is a big unknown, right? We're going to get over that later when we talk fixing the Patriots. But for the offense specifically, Vrabel has talked about maximizing Drake May, how important that is. Josh McDaniels, it seemed like if Ben Johnson wasn't their guy head coach, McDaniels was probably the best option. So what do you think of those guys, where they could potentially improve in their new stints, and also how they can maximize Drake May?
Well, let's start at the top with Vrabel, because that's really where it starts with any organization. Tone setter. What's he going to bring back as a coach? And I think there's that common misconception outside of New England that he was a Belichick coach. And he really wasn't. He went out of his way to get his coaching wings under other trees and experienced other things and be able to bring those back. But yet he's a longtime Patriot. He fully understands the market and the team and really what it has to be. And if you look at his Titans teams for the kind of teams that he put together, there was definitely a Vrabel-type player. He wanted a tough football player who was not small. He's big in his size. He wants big, strong guys to go out and play a big, strong sport. And I think we'll see that shift over time. Again, it's not all going to happen in one cycle, but he's going to set the tone for toughness. That's what worked when he was a player there. That's what worked when he coached in other places. He's going to bring that back to New England. In terms of McDaniels in the offense, I think a really good get for them for multiple reasons, and probably his best role. We've seen him as a head coach. Not my favorite role for him. As an offensive coordinator, he's just one of those guys that's way better at that job. So he gets to come back. He gets to work with Drake May, who you talked about. Obviously, Vrabel wants to maximize the young franchise quarterback. That's not exactly rocket science. Get the guy some weapons and put him with somebody that understands and is going to give him answers. We saw him a lot of times last year without answers. They don't want to see that anymore. That's not in anybody's best interest. Drake should be really excited. He gets to work with a really experienced and versatile offensive coordinator. He's got a head coach that wants to basically give him all the good things. As a young player, his world has turned significantly from last season to this season.
Absolutely. And then the McDaniels part of that, you say, like, kind of give him everything. This is going to be an offense where he has a lot more command, right? The West Coast, a lot of it, we know the center was really in charge making the calls. In Josh McDaniels' offense, whatever Drake May can handle, he will be in charge of. And that's kind of exciting for a guy who we know is a very intelligent player and has all the talent in the world. So for the draft, we are going to be talking about what the Patriots could do with the number 4 pick when we get to fix the Patriots. But before that, I want to know, who do you think, or position groups-wise, where should the Patriots be pouncing early because of the depth that they have at certain positions, and specifically positions of need? And where do you think they could maybe wait and find some gems on day 3 or later on in the draft?
Oh, that's a great question about relative strength of each draft class. And everyone is its own snapshot. Everyone is its own group, and this is it. You just get this year's chances. We hear all the time, oh, wait till next year, the class is better. That's not how NFL teams think. They have to do it this year. They have to fill all those holes. So this year, tight end is extremely strong, but the Patriots tight end group is great, so that necessarily doesn't line up for them. They don't have a lot of need there. Running back is extremely strong. Running back's okay for the Patriots as well. Defensive line is historically deep. If you're talking about Daniel Jeremiah or Dane Brugler, last year they had low 20s of guys that were draftable in that position group. This year it's low 40s. It's
good news for Vrabel.
Literally double. You want those big, strong guys that are going to play tough football? There's a bunch of them and all different flavors. You got inside guys, 1-techs, 3-techs, true nose, guys that can, float out to a 4-eye, flip inside on passing downs. There's just strength, speed, size, little guys, big guys, squatty guys. 40 defensive tackles that you can pick from. So if you wait there because of relative scarcity to other positions or priority that they put on those positions, they feel like they have to strike early and go get those, you've got, an extra 2 or possibly even 3 rounds worth of defensive tackles in your back pocket. That, as an organization, is a tremendous benefit.
And for the Patriots, they have Devon Gottschall, Christian Barmore. They're penciled in as starters. Gottschall last year of his deal, we know he's pretty much exclusively a run stuffer. Christian Barmore dealt with blood clots last year, so we have no idea what his outlook is going to be. No real starting talent behind them, so that's going to be huge. Now, you mentioned the different areas of strength. Where do you think, or who do you think are some names Patriots fans should be looking out for in that day 2, day 3 range? Like you mentioned, Vrabel's got his type. Are there some guys that stand out to you, and it's like, you know what, I think Vrabel's really going to get excited when he turns that guy's tape on?
Oh, and the Barmore situation, I'm really glad you brought it up, because extremely talented player and a real sort of crux move for an NFL team, and Barmore's not the only one. When you have a star-level player whose availability is in question, and you hope he's going to be on the field, whether it's injury of some type or a medical condition like this, it's really difficult. You've got a lot of resources invested in that guy. When he's in there, everything works great, but he's not always in there. And so do we get him a backup? Well, that's prudent, but then we're spending extra resources where we've already put resources, and you kind of double up. So it's a really tough thing to do. But just sitting here thinking about it, one guy popped into my head. He's from Oregon. Extremely talented defensive line class, Jamari Caldwell.
Yeah, I like that you went there. Okay, why do you like him?
He is very large. Mm-hmm. He is an imposing figure on the inside of the defensive line, but he can also roll for his size. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of guys like Gottschall, who you talked about, the Patriots are super familiar with, that is purely a run stuffer at that frame size. Like, Jamari Caldwell has that frame size, but when he breaks through and there's nobody in front of him, he can rush the passer a little bit. And he's going to be available, 90s, 100-ish. Again, because of the depth of this defensive tackle class, that's picking up dollars that the draft just dropped in front of you.
Yep. And then teammate Derek Harmon. You think he's going to go in the first round?
I believe he will. Mm-hmm. He'll be the first, but Jordan Birch is probably going to go in the second round.
He's loaded
so
front.
Three guys, and there's multiple teams this year, college teams, who are going to have 3 guys off their front. Mm-hmm. Oregon's one, Texas A&M,
yep.
It's another one. So always fun to see that and sort of pick out the relative strengths of a guy and say how much should they benefit from those other guys being there, or were they really the straw that was stirring the drink? Mm-hmm. But that Oregon defense is ridiculous. There's literally guys from that, not just the defense. There's literally guys at every level from that team. The running back's going to get drafted.
Yep.
The quarterback's going to get drafted. Mm-hmm. The tight end's going to get drafted. 2 to 3 of the offensive linemen are going to get drafted. We just talked about 3 of the defensive linemen getting drafted. Jeffrey Bossa's the linebacker.
Oh, my guy. I love me some Bossa.
And then we got Jabbar Muhammad, who's going to be one of the great star nickel slot players in this. Like, literally every level as you go through offense and defense from that Oregon team has got guys represented in this draft. And it's not surprising they went as far as they did.
Well, it's a perfect segue because we talk about Oregon, Texas A&M, these defensive linemen. Well, we're going to go through an exercise I'm calling Fix the Patriots. Now, we've had the games where it's $5, $4, pick your, how you want your arrangement to go. The way I see it, the Patriots have more money than they know what to deal with, right? Over $120 million in cap space. And as we know, good players rarely hit the market. So the way this exercise is going to go, we're going to go through the roster. There's some spots where they don't really have any established starters. Those are going to be where we focus. But of course, there's also positions where the depth is kind of shallow because of, like we mentioned with Barmore, it can be injury, it can be age, it can be contract, it can be a combination of things. So we are going to try to insert players into each spot. Now, in this list, I kind of avoided guys like Abdul Carter, Ronnie Stanley, T. Higgins, players who it seems like may not fall to the Patriots, but you are more than welcome to pick whomever you want to fill in. The only rule is we're going to try to lean towards some level of realism again. If it's like T. Higgins, it's probably going to have to be trade rather than just signing him. So we will start with the offensive line.
For sure.
David Andrews in the center. We know one of the better, more consistent centers in football, but getting up there in age, had a pretty serious shoulder injury last year. Not 100% sure what his future looks like. Cole Strange looked okay behind him. Very limited sample size, another guy who's not been available. Mike Nwenu is really the only piece you feel confident in.
Right.
And you got Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson last year, but you don't know what you have in them yet. And is this regime going to say, hey, we're just going to get Bridges and we're going to see what these guys have? Or are they going to say, hey, man, we're going to try to get the best players? So, left tackle, left guard, right tackle, what's your strategy to fix the offensive line?
Well, I think you're going to have to dip into both pools, as is very typical in NFL team building. You're going to get a draft or 2 draftable players probably, and maybe 2 in free agency as well, because you need your best 9. Ben Johnson was at the presser yesterday, and he said, we don't need our best 5. We need to know who our best 5 are, but we also know multiple guys along that line are going to miss time.
Yep.
So we need our best 9. We're going to start our best 5, but we need 9 we feel good about playing. And that's where I think guys like Layden Robinson and Sidney Show come in. Caden Wallace, I like a lot. Are they going to lean on them as like, absolutely, they're going to take the jump starters? Doesn't make a ton of sense. So you're going to dip into the free agency pool. You've got Cam Robinson on the list here. DeJuan Jones is a really interesting guy because of his physical profile. Just had surgery. Again, we don't know what the results of that are. We don't get to see the medicals like they do here at the Combine, but both of those guys would be interesting names.
And the Vrabel connection with DeJuan Jones as well. They got really close when Vrabel was in Cleveland last year.
Correct. He is a known.
Yeah.
So again, he knows whether he likes him or whether he doesn't. We don't know that, but he does.
Exactly.
So we'll see how that works. Morgan Moses, getting up there long in the tooth, but again, he's going to give you not only veteran leadership, but another guy that is probably going to roll into your top 9 with all his experience. Not probably going to break the market either because he's not going to be a first wave guy. So I think there's your sort of dip into the tackle pool. The problem is if you really don't think Andrew's health is great, this is not a super strong draft for centers specifically. You're either going to get 1 or 2 at the top, and then you're going to wait a long time, maybe down into like the 150s, the 160s, and then some other guys later who you aren't going to shove into starting roles right away. So you're hoping that Andrew's health is good and that Cole Strange is a good backup. The guard class, on the other hand, you could go 1 high. You could get a Tyler Booker up in the sort of low 40s and then wait a little bit and still get a good guard prospect a little bit farther down. Mix those with your tackles from free agency, put them all in a pot, mix and stir. You're probably going to get your best 9.
Right. So what about the left tackle spot? Because obviously Will Campbell has been the guy that's been mocked to the Patriots a ton.
For sure.
Do you see him as a long-term left tackle option? Do you think he'd probably be better at guard, maybe at right? What's your thoughts there?
I think it would work pretty well. I think I'm going to let him fail at tackle. A friend of mine said that.
I like that.
Right? I look at his tape, I look at his physical measurables, and I'm going to let him fail at tackle first. And I know that doesn't sound great. It sounds like a backhanded compliment. I'm sure your fans are thinking the same thing. Let him fail.
It is what it is.
You're going to give him a shot and see if he holds up. And we've seen that over multiple years. Peter Skoronski was a similar guy. Like, are they going to play him at tackle? Are they going to play him at guard? Titans eventually end up deciding to play him at guard. Each team is a little bit different, but Will Campbell has the physical attributes, I think, to play tackle. Now, whether or not he can is a completely different scenario.
Right. So are you picking him at 4? Or maybe after a trade down if you're the Patriots, would you feel comfortable picking him at 4?
It's a reach for me,
Yeah,
just because it's 4, not because it's Will Campbell.
So who do you want for the left guard, Actually, I think right tackle. Could we go Morgan Moses? Is that fair?
I think Morgan Moses is fine. I would you mentioned Ronnie Stanley. I would love to have him at the top. Again, is he going to be available? I don't know. If he is, if I'm right Vrabel, do I take a swing at him? I probably do.
I like that. And then left guard, what do you think? Because he's got Tevin Jenkins, right? They have some guys on the staff who are familiar with Chicago.
Yeah.
You also have Patrick McCarry, a guy who can play a ton of different spots. So if you're saying, hey, Morgan Moses goes down, he can slide over.
Yeah.
If Layden Robinson plays well, what do you think about maybe that left guard spot?
I would go with McCarry, again, because of that Vrabel physical preference.
Yeah.
Big, strong, brawler type guy. Baltimore, that's where he's coming from. He already knows that physical profile.
100%. All right, now let's wrap this. Obviously, way too early prediction here, but with Vrabel, with McDaniels, guys who you actually know what they can do in the NFL, and you're hoping with a quarterback they can really have some success. What are your floor ceiling predictions for this team and where they could potentially go? And again, before free agency or draft, we're not holding you to this.
No. I think they could easily win 6 or 7 games, like just off of Vrabel.
Awesome.
I've watched that guy coach some less talented teams to greater success. You need that from your head coach. Can they go higher than that? Absolutely. If Drake May just absolutely bonds and gels with McDaniels right off, they get him some weapons, like you said, this is pre-free agency, pre-draft, and they click, you see teams like that take off in the second half. But I think they easily probably win 6 or 7 games, and if things start to come together in the second half, they play tough, smart football, it's more than that.
Basically the goal last year, you want to finish strong.
Right.
It's not going to be the win total I think fans want, but after the past couple of years, I think they'll be very happy with it.
All right.
EJ, appreciate you, buddy.
Absolutely,
Thank you so
Taylor. Thank you for the time.
PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on PrizePicks. They now offer Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. And the second half of the basketball season is officially here, and the race to the playoffs is heating up on PrizePicks. So don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight for playoff positioning. You think LeBron James will get more than 24 points? You think Giannis will get more than 35? Cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season. All you got to do is sign up on the PrizePicks app today, download the app, and use that code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
What's going on, everyone? Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media, reporting live from Radio Row here at the 2025 NFL Combine. I am joined by a good friend of the show. You saw him earlier this month. We've been going through these circuits together for the past few weeks. Daniel Harms of the Draft Network does an amazing job. Had to get a draft expert on to not only talk about the draft, but also some free agency and also the new regime for the Patriots. First of all, Dan, thanks for coming back on, brother.
Yeah, of course. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. As you know, new regime for the Patriots, but also familiar faces. Mike Vrabel, former player, is back as the head coach. Josh McDaniels once again in charge as OC. Terrell Williams, first-time defensive coordinator, long-time defensive line coach. But really the focus this offseason is on Vrabel and Josh McDaniels because the face of the franchise, or at least as far as we know right now, is Drake May. Fantastic rookie season when he went in there, showed a lot of great things, making them a more desirable free agent destination, hopefully, but we'll get to that soon.
Absolutely.
When it comes to Vrabel and McDaniels, we know the things they can bring, but I'm curious from your perspective, where should they improve in their most recent stints in New England, and also how do you see them maximizing Drake May?
One of the things that I loved this week was getting to hear Vrabel talk about him working with the offense a little bit more in Cleveland. Yeah. Because when you watched the wide receivers last year in New England, what was one of the main things? Like, they felt like they just moved off from Jalen Polk really quickly, right? Yeah. Like, that didn't seem to work. And then you saw just kind of randomness pop up. You know, we know Pop Douglas is good, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know what else you got there. Yep. I think one of the big things that we're going to see with New England is spots and timing. And that's one thing we know that McDaniels is going to be very good at, is getting guys trained up to be in the right spots. Because when Drake May, obviously we know he can make plays off script, and that's what he does, you know, at a high level. But you want to tame some of the, let's just say, decisions that he can make at times.
Some wonkiness.
Just a little bit. But when you can do that with the timing and spacing properly with your young receivers, bringing in some veterans maybe that can help mold those young players, that's one of the things that I'm really interested to see that they've worked on. How they're going to work with Vrabel and McDaniels to talk about that offensive side to get that timing down, because you can start getting the ball out a little bit quicker for him, and then you can start really tapping into his downfield process, because he's, as we all know, a fantastic player down the field.
Absolutely. And it's not just about Drake May, because the coaches have emphasized the supporting cast around him. Yeah. You have a head coach and an offensive coordinator who can work with any position on the offense. That's going to be huge. Just the in-between. If there's an area or position group where you're struggling, the offensive line, the receivers, those guys can get some really hands-on attention. And even we heard from Elliott Wolf, the executive vice president of player personnel, and said that, hey, we put too much on Jalen Polk's plate, and we actually kind of stunted his growth. And it was nice to see them acknowledge that, because they moved him around since he was really the only threat they had on the outside. So looking now towards the draft, it feels like there's some pockets where there's really good depth, like every year, and then some places where not so much. So from a Patriots perspective, where do you think they need to be pouncing early in the draft, and where do you think maybe they can wait and get better value later on?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the offense right there. I think that's when we look at this draft, it's very defense heavy. Yeah. So some of your offensive positions like tackle and wide receiver aren't going to be as deep with the elite top talent, right? So I don't know what the Patriots are going to do with their pick. They can stay there depending on who falls, but you could also trade down. The idea of maybe getting some more top 100 picks and being able to get a Will Campbell if that's what they want to do. I know everyone worries about the arm length. For me personally, I still want to play him at tackle. The hand usage itself and the willingness to adapt and counter with his hands to mitigate the length issues and some of those length concerns does give him the ability for me to start at tackle, and then you work with what you have. So that's a place you might want to look, even if you trade down a little bit and you maybe want to get bigger, longer. Minnesota tackle Arianta Ursary is still a very big favorite for me.
Yes, sir.
I love what he brings, and the fact that he is one of those bigger guys. I believe he's going to test pretty well. I don't think he's an elite athlete by any stretch. but he's not bad.
For a 330-pounder, like, he moves pretty well.
There's a couple times where Minnesota's, pulling him out and leading, blocking on the left side. Like, that's what you want to see from these big guys. So
some reach blocks I saw from him on tape where I was like, wait a minute, I didn't know big man could move like that.
When he gets out of his blocks, man, he can get on guys and really start moving people. He really finishes well. Really good hand usage too. So there's some options there. And then at wide receiver, right? Maybe you move down a few spots. And we've heard that Tedero McMillan is apparently falling in drafts and mocks.
Yeah, that's been alarming.
It's an interesting thing for me because he's still a top 10 player in this class in my mind. And if you can get better at wide receiver, I know he doesn't have the speed down the field to really separate, but he does everything well. And we talk about timing and spacing, right? One thing that Ted McMillan is the most underrated part of his game is he's so good at understanding zone, finding those soft spots in the defense. That is what we know. Hunter Henry loves Drake May. Like, he's been a really nice safety blanket for him. Where is that other safety blanket? If it's not going to be Jalen Polk, we don't really know. Tedero McMillan can be that right now.
Absolutely.
Be a safety blanket to see those soft spots in zones. And when you make the ball come out quickly to a trusted playmaker like that, it helps the entire offense flow. So those are two positions and players, some other things you might be able to get out of this first round if you're trading down, or even if you just want to go ahead and do it now.
And as you mentioned, there are a lot of ways the Patriots go with the number 4 pick, whether trade down or is there any specific place that you'd like to see them go where you have a strong conviction that you think they need to make a certain move before they start getting the later picks and trying to fill some other holes?
Yeah, I do think it's tackle for me. Personally, that's my own. Again, you guys might see it differently, but outside looking in, I don't know the whole details of it, but when you look at the offensive line, they've had to move guys around, right? They play guard, play tackle. But if you can solidify that tackle spot with someone who is going to be a tackle, not question, is he going to play guard, is he going to play tackle? Will Campbell is one of those guys, but again, for me, I've seen Arianta Ursary move down in mocks. I'm seeing him go all the way into the 30s, which I think is kind of ridiculous, personally. But that's a player, again, if you're talking about trading down and accumulating some more picks to just throw, because we heard Mike Vrabel talk about how this roster is going to look drastically different from now until August.
Devon Godchaux already a guy that they're letting seek a trade.
Exactly. So if you think about it, realistically, take as many chances and shots in the top 100 as you can in this draft, where people say, anywhere from 20 to 70, the values might be the same for a lot of these teams, and that might be the same for them. So I think you can get that tackle if you trade down and still acquire lots of different picks and just kind of build up that roster.
Yep, and I really just want to see what those first 2 picks, whether they trade down, whether they trade back into the first round from the second, whatever happens, I want them to address the trenches on both sides of the ball. Get your tackle, get yourself an edge rusher, some kind of dominant defensive presence who has some upside for Terrell Williams and the defensive staff to work with. But also, Elliot Wolf mentioned, it's very meaty, this draft, in the middle. Like you mentioned, that's where a lot of the value is going to be. So who are some day 2 to day 3 picks the Patriots fans should have their eyes out for?
I'm a big fan of UCLA defensive end Femi Oladajo.
Oh, yeah, Senior Bowl standout.
That dude is not just one of the guys you want to have character-wise, really well-spoken. When you listen to him in the interviews, like, he doesn't really have the tics or anything like that. He's very well-spoken, knows exactly what he wants to say. And then you watch him on the field. That guy he's like a wind-up toy. Like, you just get him pointed in the right direction, and he's going to tear things up. And I love that style of playmaker. He's big, he's long, former linebacker, so he has that speed, athleticism to make plays. And then he's got that 260-pound build. Right? Like, that's what you really want from these guys. And when you're able to do some of the things that he does with his length and already has some natural instincts as a defensive end, he can also grow and get better. And you guys know some of these big guys, Keon White comes in, he just is really good. You can reduce him inside. You can match with some ferocious guy off the edge like that. Those are some things that you really want to have on the defensive line. At defensive tackle, there's so many different players. I mean, right now, Kenneth Grant is not going to be testing at the Combine.
I love Kenneth Grant.
I know you do. And there's going to be some talks about what's with the injuries. Does he actually test as well? Personally, for me, I'm going to have a second-round grade on him.
Okay.
Because some of the film doesn't always back up with the athleticism for me. But the upside, right? The upside for him is immense at 300, and now he said yesterday it was 32 pounds. Dropped a little bit of weight. He wants to improve. I would imagine going to his pro day where he's going to do all of his testing and things like that, so he can run faster, he can be more agile. I mean, if like you said, if they want to trade back up into the first round, maybe you do that. But he also might fall down. I mean, there's some big guys. The Kentucky defensive tackle. Deion Walker. Deion Walker, yeah, he's another one of these traitsy upside guys. Last year wasn't the best year for him, but go back to 2023. That tape is fantastic.
Okay.
Like, it's really good. And then you see him get
What did you see the difference was actually between those seasons?
Felt like he's playing a little bit of some bad weight this past year. when you're playing like that and you're trying to get off the ball, you stand up a little bit more. He's big.
And you saw that at the Senior Bowl too.
He stands up, he gets pushed back. So pad level is coachable. It is one of the, I personally say it's one of the easier things to coach, but he's 6'7". He's a big guy. So it's about coming out, right? When we play pad level, we talk about, people always talk about like your shoulders. Hips. You can keep your hips down because you don't want your just shoulders down, right? You're in a bad position if your knees are up, down, you're bent like this. You can get pushed over. Guys can swim, all that kind of stuff. But for defensive tackles, you want to have those hips low, and so you can get underneath his offensive line, anchor in there, and then you can let your linebackers feast. So he's somebody else that I think would help in the middle of this defensive line to really give them some bulk to pair, because he's also got really high upside as a pass rusher.
And the exciting thing is the Patriots now have defensive coaches where you really can look at them and say, I think they can maximize whatever defensive talent they bring in. Terrell Williams, his track record speaks for itself. You've got 2 pass rush specialists on the roster, and then obviously Mike Vrabel as well. So you're hoping that, and Williams says, hey, I want guys who are violent, I want guys who attack. And it's pretty much just like, hey, if you have those kind of traits like an Oladejo, where, all right, all I got to do is wind you up and point you in that right direction, then maybe it's sky-high potential for them. So let's transition perfectly into our Fix the Patriots segment. We're going to go through a position group and try to see where the best fits might be for the Patriots' most glaring areas of need. We're going to kick it off with the defensive line. Now, nose tackle, it's kind of up in the air right now because, again, Devon Gottschall, they gave permission to request a trade, so he's probably not going to be around. And you expect they're going to want some guys who have more pass rush upside. Where Gottschall, a great run defender, doesn't give you a lot else. So personally, I think maybe Christian Barmore slides into that spot, a guy who can handle the double teams, split doubles, dominate either way. But injury concerns, right? The blood clot issue. We have no idea what the outlook's going to be, so his status is up in the air. The only guys you really want to count on next season are Anthony Jennings, elite run defender, not much pass rush value, and then Keon White, who's been an excellent interior rusher, very inconsistent pretty much anywhere else. So when you look at the roster, we got nose tackle, defensive tackle, each of the edges, and also interior rusher and edge rusher in those obvious pass situations. We got the list, but also you can slide anybody on here. The only limit is just kind of realism, right? Because they have all this fun money. They can't even spend it all. They have good draft capital. So let's start with nose tackle and defensive tackle. What would you like to see them do with, right now, Christian Barmore and Jeremiah Farms looking like they're going to be on the team?
I think this is the number one answer and the best answer to help fix it. Milton Williams, coming off a fantastic season from the Eagles, obviously was one of the big reasons why they won the Super Bowl. Being able to impact the quarterback at that level, like you talked about, if you can get Christian Barmore, get him healthy, you can pair him on those pass rush downs, that's something that you want to really think about, not only because Williams is big enough to hold up in the run defense and give you some of that flexibility, that interior pass rush, run stopping, but he's still growing as a player, right? He had his best season to date this past year in 2024. He's going to get better. Like, that's what you want. And you pair him with these other guys too. I mean, maybe you look at former Eagle defensive end Josh Sweat too. Familiarity with the position, length, you got size. When we talk about throwing waves at offensive lines, that's how you do it. And like you said, fun money. Legitimately fun money. They have so much money to play with. They can, and Vrabel talked about opportunity along with that money. And when you have holes, Milton Williams is looking to not only make money, but prove that he's a really good, fantastic defensive tackle. He can do that with the opportunity he's going to be given. So for me, putting him next to Barmore in that rotation, even with Keon White in there to rotate, that is something you want to really think about.
And if you want a 5-man front, if you drop one of the edges, you have those 3 guys rushing on the inside with one-on-one matchups. That is terrifying for anybody. We know Vrabel has talked about the trenches. He said, hey, sometimes you got to overpay for guys at some of these premium spots. I know people say the defensive tackle isn't a premium position. If you can affect the game and you are right in the middle of the defense, I highly disagree. And I think Milton Williams is one of those guys. And usually these kind of guys don't hit the market. You don't see true game changers consistently where it's like, oh, I actually think we can sign them. But the Eagles, they're obsessed with the trenches, so they have more than enough guys to replace them. So let's now go on to the right defensive end. On the left side, you're probably going to have Anthony Jennings. To the strong side, are you sticking with Josh Sweat as the guy opposite him?
I think you want to at least try, right? That's the thing, is because you talked about, we actually talked this before we came on, where you want a veteran, right? Someone like Matthew Judon, who did come in and brought a little bit of that. But what you're getting with Sweat is that length and speed off the edge that you didn't always have from Judon. He had fast speed off the edge. He just didn't have that length, right? And Josh Sweat, while he's not going to be the best run defender, he's going to give you some of that length where if you're trying to force guys back to the interior of the defense that you just improved, right, he can give you that. set the edge outside with that arm, whichever it is, right or left, and then you can really start to force guys into the teeth of that defense. If you get a fully healthy Christian Barmore, you put Keon White in there, and you have Milton Williams. Like, that is one of the best situations, I think, not only for your defense that you want, right, to have for Drake May and the offense to take a little bit of pressure off them, but for everybody else, because they're all going to be able to eat in that kind of system.
All right, so it's going to be Josh Sweat on the edge, but then in those obvious pass rushing situations, if he's going to be on one edge, who do you want on the other side? Personally, I am a big fan of Michael Williams. Literally same size as Josh Sweat, not the same profile, but you could see how maybe a little mentorship where Williams is a guy who's still coming along technique-wise, and Sweat, that guy's a technician, can win a lot of different ways. So that's just my personal favorite. I don't want to influence you, but who do you got as maybe a situational pass rusher who could also maybe develop into something more?
That's where it is for me, because if you look at the rest of this defensive line, you've got some speed, you've got power, you got size, right? James Pierce out of Tennessee is somebody who I'm going to be a little bit lower on, but it's because the film is still, he's got to reach that potential.
Yeah.
Very fast off the edge. He's got really quick hands, spin move back inside those inside counters. He flashes those on tape.
Yep.
Plus, if you're saying you get him one-on-one, like, you're going to be able to isolate him with the defensive players on the interior and then the opposite side to give him some one-on-ones against maybe the worst tackle or the worst player. And I think you can do a lot of different things with him too because of that speed. If you want to just move guys around, maybe you play Keon White. Hey, go kick outside. Get wide.
Right.
Let us isolate this guard.
Yeah.
And then say, Pierce, hey, I know you're not necessarily an inside guy. Stand up, speed past them.
Yeah.
Like, you can do a lot of different things with speed and power, and that's something that I think would be a lot of fun because he also has length and the ability to put on a little bit more weight to be more impactful against the run. And that upside as a pass rusher just gives you so much more versatility to your defensive line. Obviously, big bodies are, and having that ability in the NFL is huge, but multiple different ways you can attack offensive lines so they don't always expect the exact same thing.
Right.
Gives you more versatility to go after quarterbacks in different ways.
I do like the upside with Pierce. You know, watching the film, you can see there's some stretches where it's like, I don't totally see it. And then when it comes on, it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Are you worried at all about the off-field stuff, especially for a team like New England's trying to rebuild? You have a guy like Vrabel who, you go back to Cleveland, right? He bonds with DeJuan Jones, a guy who struggled with his weight, and he said, you know what, just, you got small victories, you know, and the ability to connect to players. Do you think maybe that gives them, if, you know, Pierce falls, okay, give him to Vrabel and he'll be able to help him out? Or, you know, what are your thoughts there?
That's exactly what you want to do. I think you want to put players that maybe have made some decisions that they're not especially proud of, some bad choices off the field throughout college or maybe earlier in their career. You want to put them in situations with guys that can do that. I think Mike Vrabel is one of the most like real people like that I've ever seen. I've never talked to him specifically, but listening to him again in those pressers the other day, you can see that he not only cares about the game, but the players.
Absolutely.
And that is one of the big aspects of growing a culture, right? It's not just about, let's draft the best players. Let's find some guys that maybe if we can get their head clear and fix some of the stuff that they have going on in their own head, they can get to that untapped potential. And I think that might be one of the situations for James Pierce specifically to bring him into this area where you're trying to rebuild that culture. And I think Mike Vrabel can do that.
It's easy to forget these are really young players.
Exactly.
And a lot of the responsibility of a coach at some point is mentorship. Like, you're helping them, help these guys mature and become adults. So that would be a really interesting fit. All right, final one for you, Dan. Floor and ceiling, way too early. We haven't even gotten to free agency, which could completely affect our outlook on the draft. But given the regime change, the new people in leadership, Drake May, what do you think we could see as like maybe the worst case scenario in the first year of this new regime and maybe the best case scenario?
I mean, worst case is if everything is completely different, like he's talking about chemistry.
Right.
How are you going to work that in with your offense, with your defense, if you're given, multiple guys that have been here for years, opportunities to come in or come out? You might see a whole different style. I think that outside of, last year, I don't think that that's a realistic outcome for this Patriots team. Not saying that they'll be, a great team off the bat, but when you look at the organizational constitution that he's trying to create, I think that gives players comfort. Yeah. And when you're trying to build a team, you got to start somewhere, right? You have to. And I think that bringing in guys like we talked about that maybe need a little bit more mentorship, even some of the ones that are already on the roster, Mike Vrabel is going to be able to do that. Absolutely. So the floor, I think, is maybe they're not great in terms of record. Yeah. But I think you'll watch this team. You guys remember the Detroit Lions?
Yeah.
Before they got good?
Yeah. That's what the Patriots were supposed to be last year.
That's right. Like, they fought in every single game. I'm not going to try to compare them and say that that's the trajectory that we're going to see for the Patriots, but I believe that the floor for this team is maybe not the most talented of the best, but they are going to fight every single game. And the best outcome, I think they could legitimately be an 8-9, 9-8 team if you hit on some of these picks and some of the free agents as well, where you get that continuity and also that next step from Drake May with Josh McDaniels, how that all works out. That really helps, especially if you can bring in one other player. They can just get that timing, right? We talked about that earlier, but that is one of the most important steps to a young quarterback, taking those steps. So floor-wise, we talked about it a little bit, really feisty, really good, tough effort team. Upside, this could be a middling team in the AFC, maybe even be able to make some of those last wild card spots. Obviously, they're always
it's tough, yeah.
It's tough to do it, but I think that that's a more borderline realistic outcome.
And then even the second-year jumps from the receivers and offensive linemen. If you get one of the linemen and one of the receivers to really significantly improve, that really helps out on the offense in the passing game. So worst case scenario, they're at least respectable. Best case scenario, maybe they're fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the season. Dan, thanks so much, brother.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you.